Good morning. Presenting the topic Rational Approach to IV Fluids and ICU, and my moderator is Dr. Tanmay sir. Introduction. IV fluids are a cornerstone of treatment of emergency and intensive care medicine. There are numerous varieties of IV fluids. However, their safety is under debate, particularly with colloids. The types of IV fluids we have is mainly crystalloids, colloids, and blood products. And though IV fluids include all the above three, this presentation includes discussion on crystalloids and colloids. Coming to the types of IV fluids, we have, based on the tonicity of the fluids, we have isotonic fluids, hypotonic and hypertonic fluids. So isotonic fluids, the osmolality is close to the plasma, that is between 250 to 375 milliosmoles per liter, and whenever isotonic fluids are given, there is no shifting of the fluids and only serves to increase the extracellular fluid volume. Coming to hypotonic fluids, the osmolality is less than 250, and there is shifting of the fluid from the intravascular to both intra and interstitial spaces, and this causes hydration of the cells and it causes swelling. Coming to hypertonic fluids, the osmolality is more than 375 milliosmoles per liter, and whenever hypertonic fluids are given, water moves out of the intracellular space, increasing the ACF volume, causing dehydration of the cells and shrinkage. The examples of isotonic fluids are 0.9% NaCl, Ringer lactate or Hartmann solution, 5% dextrose in water. Hypotonic fluids include 0.5% sodium chloride, 0.3% sodium chloride, 0.2% and 2.5% dextrose in water. Hypertonic fluids include 3% NaCl, 5% NaCl and more than 5% dextrose in water. Coming to crystalloids and colloids, crystalloids are predominantly based on solutions of sterile water with added electrolytes to approximate the content of human plasma. Colloids are based on crystalloid solutions, thus containing water and electrolytes, but they have an added component of a colloid substance that does not freely diffuse across any semi-permeable membrane. So colloids can raise the intravascular volume quicker and using less volume than using crystalloids. Thus, coming to isotonic solutions, isotonic solutions are indicated in dehydration. 5% dextrose in water is isotonic when infused, but it becomes hypotonic when dextrose gets metabolized. So it is used cautiously in patients who are already fluid overloaded or who would be compromised if the vascular volume would increase, such as in renal and cardiac patients. Example, 0.9% sodium chloride is used or normal saline is used in shock, resuscitation, fluid challenges, blood transfusion, metabolic alkalosis, hyponatremia and diabetic ketoacidosis. Again, it is used in caution patients with heart failure, edema, hypernatremia and can lead to fluid overload. Ringer's lactate is used in dehydration, burns, any gastrointestinal tract fluid loss, acute blood loss, hypovolemia, etc. Since it contains potassium, it can cause hyperkalemia in renal patients, and the lactate in this fluid is converted into bicarbonate in the liver. 5% dextrose in water is used whenever there is fluid loss and dehydration in cases of hypernatremia, and since the solution becomes hypotonic when dextrose is metabolized, it is not used as a resuscitative fluid, and it is also used cautiously in renal and cardiac patients because of the side effect of fluid overload after metabolization. Coming to hypotonic solutions, hypotonic solutions are used whenever there is hypertonic dehydration, when there is gastric fluid loss, cellular dehydration from excessive diuresis, or whenever you require a slow rehydration. The special considerations you have to give is that you should not use it in patients with raised intracranial pressure, and it is not used for rapid rehydration, and it is not used when there are electrolyte disturbances. Hypertonic fluids such as the 5% dextrose in normal saline is used in heat-related disorders, in freshwater drowning and peritonitis. Again, it is avoided in cardiac and renal impaired patients, and whenever you are administering it to diabetics, you have to make sure that you check for the sugars before. Compared to 5% dextrose and Ringer lactate, again it is used for hypovolemic shock, hemorrhagic shock, and certain cases of acidosis. Similarly, avoided in renal and cardiac impairment, and you have to monitor for the circulatory overload. 5% dextrose and 0.5% NaCl, that is D half NS, is used in heat exhaustion and diabetic disorders. Again, it is not used as a rapid fluid replacement. Coming to colloids, as we discussed before, we have gelatin-based colloids like gelofuscin and hemacil, hydroxyethyl with starch, which is plant-based. Again, based on the ratio of the C to C6 ratio, we have pentastarches, tetrastarches, and hetastarch, which is a high molecule higher generation hydroxyethyl starch. But the only thing we have to remember is the maximum amount of fluids we can use in a day is about 1.5 liters to 2.5 liters per day for pentastarch, whereas for tetrastarches we can use about 50 ml per kg per hour, that is up to 3.5 liters per day. Means as the molecular weight and as the ratio increases, so the amount you can use decreases. The other type of colloids is dextran 40 and dextran 70. Which are used in trauma. Maximum 1 liter per day can be used. And human albumin solutions, that is 5% and 20%, can also be used as volume expanders. Mainly, they are mainly used in sepsis. Coming to actions of colloids or plasma expanders, colloids contain large insoluble particles such as gelatin, and if colloids are used if crystalloids do not improve the blood volume. Long-lasting effect should be colloids have a long-lasting effect, hence they should be infused slowly, and you have to watch out for circulatory overload. It is used in the emergency treatment of shock, circulatory collapse, hypotonic dehydration. It has been assumed that since the past 60 years, both colloids and crystalloids are safe and effective means of IV fluid resuscitation. But in 1998, there was a systematic review which was published in BMJ, which questioned the safety of colloids in general, and also in a Cochrane review in 1998, which questioned the safety of albumin. So this problem was solved by a large conducted known as the SAFE trial, which was the saline versus albumin fluid evaluation. Sorry for the spelling. It is saline versus albumin fluid evaluation, which was conducted by Australia and New Zealand Intensive Care Society clinical trial groups between 2001 and 2003. It was published by NEJM in 2004. It was a double-blind prospective multi-center RCT, which determined the effect of fluid resuscitation with either 4% albumin or normal saline on mortality in a heterogeneous population of ICU patients. So the study showed that there was no overall difference in outcome according to whether patients received colloids or crystalloids, and prospective subgroup analysis means based on different comorbidities or the underlying condition. Subgroup analysis showed that trauma patients were more likely to die if they received colloids, and this was statistically true for those with traumatic brain injury compared with trauma as a whole. So that is colloids had to be avoided in patients with trauma, and especially in patients with traumatic brain injury. So severe sepsis tends towards a reduction in death for those who received colloids, and for ARDS there was no statistical significant. Coming to hydroxyethyl starch, it is derived from maize starch, which is eliminated only through kidneys as products of endogenous hydrolysis. Examples include volute and volulite, which are newer generation low molecular weight fluids, and they are most commonly used. They are the most commonly used colloid in ICU globally. So these are tetrastarches, and there was another trial called the 6S trial, which compared the hydroxyethyl starch versus Ringer's acetate in severe sepsis. So which was published in NEJM in 2012, which was conducted by the Scandinavian Critical Care Trials Group. It was again a multi-center parallel group blinded clinical trial conducted between 2009 and 2011. It was done to assess the effect of hydroxyethyl starch with a molecular weight of 130 kilodaltons and a C2C6 ratio of 0.4 compared with the balanced electrolyte solution on mortality and end-stage renal disease with severe sepsis. It was found that hydroxyethyl starch significantly increased the risk of death or dependence on dialysis at day 90, and hydroxyethyl starch increased the absolute risk of death at 90 days by 8%. So similar results were obtained in analysis adjusted for risk factors and in subgroup of patients with shock or AKI at the time of randomization. Another trial called as CHESS trial was done to compare the effect of crystalloid versus hydroxyethyl starch, which was done by the Australian and New Zealand Intensive Society Clinical Trials Group, again published in NEJM in 2002. There was no significant difference in mortality at 90 days in ICU, and here they compared the effect on mortality in 6 predefined subgroups, that is AKI, sepsis, trauma, traumatic brain injury, then Apache scoring, and then those who received HES before randomization. So in these 6 groups as well, there was no significant difference between using crystalloid or HES. However, more patients who received resuscitation with starch were treated with renal replacement therapy. So 6% of HES does not have any clinical benefit compared with saline in ICU patients. That was the outcome of this trial. So which colloid to use? 4% albumin is generally safe. It has a small advantage in sepsis as well, and but it should not be used in trauma and head injuries. Hydroxyethyl starch has no benefit over normal saline. Increased mortality. In fact, it causes increased mortality in severe sepsis, but it is more likely and also more likely to receive renal replacement therapy. Gelofuscin, which is a modified gelatin of bovine origin, generally excreted through kidneys unchanged, and there are no large RCTs performed with regards to gelofuscin, so we cannot conclusively compare it with either HCS or albumin. Specific considerations apply to different categories of patients. For example, bleeding patients require control of hemorrhage and transfusion with RBCs and blood components is indicated. Isotonic balanced salt solutions are pragmatic initial fluids for the majority of acutely ill patients. Consider saline in patients with hypovolemia and alkalosis. Consider albumin during the early resuscitation of patients with severe sepsis. Saline or isotonic crystalloids are indicated in patients with traumatic brain injury. Albumin is not indicated in patients with traumatic brain injury. Hydroxyethyl starch is not indicated in patients with sepsis or for those at risk of acute kidney injury. The safety of other semi-synthetic colloids has not been established, so the use of these solutions is not recommended. And the safety of hypertonic saline is has not been established. The appropriate type and dose of resuscitation fluid in patients with burns also has not been determined, though is considered the best. Coming to different strategies to be used in ICU patients, we have two types. One is fixed fluid replacement and the other is algorithmic approaches. In fixed fluid replacement, fixed fluid replacement should be considered as the guide to volume replacement with the actual amount to be given determined by the clinical response, including serial observation of the heart rate, BP, and urine output. Which means we are just replacing the daily requirement, the fixed amount, and we look for clinical response in terms of heart rate, BP, and output. But in extremes of age or any pre-existing disease, severity of acute illness, and major surgery, they have to be taken into account, and you can determine the amount of fluid to be replaced. This is one approach. Another is algorithmic approach, that is recent evidences suggest volume replacement targeting a specific parameter which has shown to improve the patient outcome. These parameters, these targets include invasive monitoring of cardiac chamber filling pressures like central venous pressure or pulmonary artery wedge pressure, and cardiac output. Coming to algorithmic approaches, this is by the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence Guidelines, wherein when you assess the patient for the first time, you have to assess. Obviously, you assess based on A, B, C, D, E, that is airway, breathing, circulation, disability, and exposure. And you assess whether the patient is hypovolemic and whether he needs any fluid resuscitation. So you have to, after clinical examination, you will determine whether the patient needs. For example, if the systolic BP is less than 100 or heart rate is more than 90, capillary refill time is more than 2 or 3 seconds, and peripheries are cold to touch, and the respiratory rate is more than 20 breaths per minute, and something called as 45-degree passive leg glazing test we do, wherein after about 30 seconds we look for the response. The response includes either a 10% increase in the pulse pressure or 8% increase in the cardiac output. But for that you need to have either an echo machine to look for the improvement in the cardiac output, or you have to have arterial line to look for the change in the pulse pressure, or there is also a scoring system called as NEWS, which is a National Early Warning Scale, which is again developed by the National Health Survey by UK. It is used in critically ill patients, and the various parameters in this scoring system include respiratory rate, SpO2, and requirement of oxygen support, body temperature, systolic blood pressure, heart rate, and AVPU score, that is alert, voice, pain score, that is whether the patient is alert or whether the patient is responsive to voice or responsive to pain. So after scoring all these parameters, you come to a final score, and if the final score is more than or equal to 5, then such patients are found to be having an underlying possible sepsis. So, based on all these parameters, if you feel that the patient requires a fluid resuscitation, then you go to the second algorithm, that is fluid resuscitation. So initial treatment includes identifying the cause of deficit and then similarly providing a response. If, you can give a fluid bolus or a fluid challenge of 500 ml of crystalloid, which is having the similar sodium content as that of the plasma, and in over less than 15 minutes. And then again reassess the patient using ABCD approach and determine if the patient still requires resuscitation. If the patient doesn't require, then you can give maintenance fluids, but if the patient requires, then you have to go up to, you can increase the fluid challenges, but if you have reached a limit of 2000 ml, then you can or if the patient has still has signs of shock, then you can consider seeking an expert help, like if the patient is having underlying cardiac disease, consider getting cardiac opinion. If the patient is having underlying sepsis, consider changing the antibiotics and considering inotropic support. Coming next to after initial assessment, if the patient doesn't require any fluid resuscitation, then assess the patient's likely fluid and electrolyte needs. For example, if the history in history you will assess whether the patient had any abdominal losses or whether about the patient's comorbidities. Clinical examination includes pulse, BP, capillary refill time, JVP, edema, postural hypotension. Clinical monitoring includes that is the News scoring system, then fluid balance chart, that is input output charting, then weight of the patient. And laboratory assessment includes a full blood count, urea, creatinine, and electrolytes. So with that, if the patients meet their fluid and electrolytes orally or enterally, then you can go ahead with just enteral fluid support. But if the patient does not require, the needs are not met just enterally or orally, then you have to consider giving maintenance fluids. So does the patient have any, you have to assess whether the patient has a complex fluid electrolyte replacement or abnormal distribution losses, like ongoing abnormal losses or abnormal distribution, other complex issues. Then you have to address that and provide the routine maintenance. IV maintenance fluids include a normal fluid intake of 25 to 30 ml per kg per day of water, and 1 millimoles per kg per day of sodium, potassium and chloride, and 50 to 100 grams per day of glucose. And then you have to keep reassessing the patient at timely intervals, and whenever a patient doesn't require IV fluids, you can stop it and you can just continue with the nasogastric or enteral feeding. If for more than 3 days, if the patient is requiring maintenance fluids, you can continue with just nasogastric feeding. Whereas if the patient needs are not met with just routine maintenance, then you have to go for replacement and redistribution. That is, you have to assess for existing fluid or electrolyte deficits or excess, like you have to check for dehydration, fluid overload, hyperkalemia, hypokalemia, and you have to estimate the deficits and excesses. Ongoing abnormal fluid and electrolyte losses include vomiting, nasogastric tube loss, biliary drainage loss, high volume ileal like stoma, all surgical losses, colostomy losses, ongoing blood loss like melena, sweating, fever, dehydration, pancreatic or jejunal fistula, and urinary losses like post acute kidney injury, polyuria. So all these things require excess amount of fluid intake. Redistribution problems include gross edema, severe sepsis, hypernatremia or hyponatremia, renal, liver or cardiac impairment, post-op fluid retention and redistribution, and malnourishment and refeeding issues. So after assessment of all these things, if you can prescribe by adding or subtracting from the routine maintenance and adjust for all other sources of fluid and electrolytes. And again, monitor and reassess the fluid and biochemical status at timely intervals. So this was the algorithmic approach. This is the same algorithm before. So the take-home message is you have to keep measuring the serum sodium concentration daily in all the patients receiving maintenance fluids. Use a staggered regimen for fluid administration, giving isotonic fluids during that period of high ADH secretion, that is 24 to 96 hours, and introduce hypotonic fluids only later or if hypernatremia develops. Completely avoid all the hypotonic fluids in patients whose serum sodium concentration is low or falling rapidly by more than 8 millimoles per liter per day. Acute fall in serum sodium below 125 with neurological symptoms should be considered a medical emergency, and it should include prompt control of serum sodium concentration. Rapid correction of chronic or asymptomatic hyponatremia is not indicated.